Welcome back from the break. You're still watching Sunrise at Sea right here on CTV, and it's time for our views. So today we're going to be discussing something very interesting, and this is about siblings. So wanting a sibling is a very normal occurrence for children, and especially particularly when there are no children in the family, and this goes to, you know, singletons in the home, and I mean single children. And today we're going to be discussing the case of the single child or the only child, and that is parenting an only child, and asking the question, is having siblings necessary for childhood happiness? And a viewer actually wrote in and asked the question, and she said, "Dear Sunrise at Sea, I have a dilemma. My only child wants a sibling, but I do not want to have more children. Am I selfish?" My name is Apollo Sarah, and I'm joined by the ladies today. Good morning, ladies. How are you?
Good morning, Sarah.
Are you all right?
No,
so,
I'm not fine.
Why are you not all right?
It's very chilly. Well, I'm okay. Ideally, I'm fine, but it's way too chilly out there. That is the only reason, but otherwise, I'm good.
All right, so let's dive right into it. No, parenting an only child comes with its perks, I mean the pros, and it also comes with the cons. So I just want to ask the question directly.
Yeah.
Do you think it's selfish for a parent to not want to give their only child a sibling?
In my view, it's not selfish.
It's
at
not?
all. Yes, because there's something
Are you
about
an only child?
No, I'm not an only child. Surprising, we are 5. I'm the second born of 5. So I've grown up with siblings, I've grown up with cousins, like in a whole, not really an extended family, but I got to, you know, to be surrounded by so many children. It was a very beautiful experience.
Before you answer the question, would you have wanted it any other way?
The fact that I didn't have it any other way, I wouldn't know. But, well, from my experience, it's a good thing to grow around other children,
Yes.
to have siblings. So I don't know the other side of it, but maybe if I'd grown up that way, I would know. But then again,
All
I was
right.
talking about planned parenthood. I totally believe in that. I mean, well, in the African setting, not even just the African setting, even the Bible talks about produce, fill the entire world.
That is
You know,
why
it's
we
an
are here.
obligation. Yes, that is why we are here.
That is the first assignment.
Yes, but times have changed. The economies have changed. We've been talking about prices of commodities that have increased over the past, you know, so many months, a few months ago.
Yes.
And this does come hand in hand with having children and planned parenthood, because I mean, if you are having 5 children and you are earning about 1 million shillings, and that is even, could be a lot of money when we are talking about the average Ugandan, 1 million shillings a month, and you know, there are taxes that you have to pay off of it. You have to take these children to school, you have to take care of their medical care, you have to take care of, you know, utilities back at home, literally so much that you need to do. So if you are just having kids because your child wants siblings and you are not, these are the same children eventually when they are probably going to boarding school, or even just to school, it can be day school, when they do not have everything they need and they're looking at the other child and they have everything they need, they'll come back, "Mommy, why don't I have this?
Mommy, why don't you
Yes.
have that?"
So I think that parents should actually, if you are a mother and you have an only child and they're asking you for a sibling, it's better to actually sit them down and, you know, tell them, give them the realities of life, tell them this is what is on ground, so that maybe, you know, sometimes we think that children do not understand, but they really do. They really understand. So if you tell them this is the reason that I cannot have a child as yet, or maybe if you're a single mother and you don't have a husband as yet, and you do not want to be in this kind of situation again where you are having a child with another man that you're not committed to,
Yes.
you can actually talk to your child, and maybe maybe in that moment they'll not understand, but eventually they will. I believe that parents or parents or people like us who are old enough to have children should actually plan, not just go by sentiments. I know my child wants another sibling. No, this thing needs to be planned. You just don't wake up and have children.
But aren't you depriving your child of a necessity in their life?
There is that too, but then again, you want to give your child your all. You want to be able to give your child everything. Well, for me, that is what I believe in. I mean, well, I didn't grow up a privileged child. I didn't have everything that I wanted, but yes, we have survived and we are here. But I have always put it at the back of my mind that I want my children to have everything that they need, not that they want, everything that they need. And the only way I can provide that is if I am capable, if I am capacitated to take care of them and to give them everything they need. So if I'm just having kids anyhow, without planning ahead. I mean, right now tuition is very expensive, even to the schools that you may deem very cheap schools. Tuition is actually very expensive. Rent, it can be all the other things. So honestly speaking, you need to actually think about, if you are having a child, are you able to take care of them? And you don't want to be caught in a predicament where your child is sick and you cannot afford health care, and you cannot afford them to take them to a decent hospital. So
Really?
honestly, yes.
Do you agree with what Aggie's saying?
To a great extent, I actually agree with what she's saying.
Okay.
You see, in this particular generation we're in, we're raising so many entitled kids.
Yeah.
Not so long ago, I was in a salon, and a certain lady entered the salon with maybe 6-year-old, and this time she was like, "Mommy, today I'm going to decide the kind of hairstyle that I need.
Yes.
And today you're going to have a say on it."
Mm-hmm.
And the mom was like, "Oh yeah, sure, honey. Today you
Yeah.
choose whatever you want, you know." And that can be dangerous, because what if she chose something that maybe you hadn't like planned for, like you didn't have enough money for that at that time.
Yes.
You know, I think we need to raise children that are not so entitled, and they should not influence our decisions.
Mm-hmm.
Children need to remain in children's positions. Already we have society holding us at ransom. Why don't you have children? Where's your husband? Or is this and this? Our children should not hold us ransom.
This is the thing. You say children should not be entitled, but don't you taking away their freedom of speech, freedom of expression, and just, cramping them back in this whole, like the way we were raised, we were told that you have your place, even to this day. I bet you can't talk back at your mother or your father, like regardless of how offensive or insensitive what they have said, you cannot talk back at them. But you see, this breeds contempt, bitterness, and anger and resentment within the child. So allowing a child to do simple things like, say, dictate their hairstyle, allow them to. If a child says they want a sibling, I think they should have a sibling. I honestly think it is selfish. I think it really is selfish, because you see, look at the long-term benefits of having siblings. You grew up with siblings. You grew up with siblings, right?
I grew up with siblings, but
I
they can
have
be
grown
very
up with
toxic.
They
at
can
the same
be.
time.
They can.
They can be very, very devastating. Sibling relationships they're not always the best.
Sibling relationships are like every other relationship, but you're not here quarreling about your exes now, okay? Or your difficult colleagues at work or whatnot. It's just the same, and all relationships, need work. I think that a child should have at least one more sibling. I think it's utterly selfish for parents to not have wanting more children. And perhaps you may think, oh, Sarah, you're speaking from a place of privilege. No, I think it's not about you as the parent, but it's about the sibling, because their feelings, their need is, is very valid. And many times children ask for a sibling because they have probably seen either their cousins have, siblings, like say my cousins have a brother and sister. You go at school, your friends have siblings. And it's also just, look at the benefits of having siblings.
There's many of
You're able to, you learn, to socialize. You're a lot more empathetic. You're a lot more sympathetic. You learn to share. You learn to communicate, and it, like a sibling is your first best friend.
Absolutely.
Like, why would you want to deprive a child of that? But anyway, research does say that, and it says that a new study and research has shown that children are a lot happier when they have no siblings, and I do not understand where this is coming from. But anyway, it goes on to say that only child families are becoming the new traditional families, and a lot of parents are opting to use family planning and dictate the number of children that they want, because having one child is a lot easier than having a number of children, because of look at the economy these days, the resources. It's very expensive, and it also just comes down to giving your time, all and attention to this one child. And it goes on to say, and it's there's a social psychologist and author called Susan Newman, and she has a PhD in social psychology, and she wrote in her 2011 book titled The Case of the Only Child, and she writes that many women are having children later in life, and more families are concerned about the cost of raising children. She goes on to say, with these demographic and economic trends, with the research, it indicates that only children aren't disadvantaged at all, and many have the edge in certain areas. And it is not hard to understand why single-child families are growing at a faster rate than families with more than one child. So she's basically saying families that have less children, or rather one child, are a lot more progressive than families that have multiple children. But let us remove that money.
But it's also a question of income and expenditure. I mean, if you're bringing in so much money and yet spending less, then yes, it's actually an added advantage. But then again, growing up with siblings is a good thing, because you have best friends. Well, at least for me, I do. I don't know about you. Yeah. When you grow your relationships with your family, at the end of the day, will always be very fundamental. You could go out there and have friends who, turn into family, but it will always be your fallback plan. So having siblings is very fundamental. But like she said, your child shouldn't hold you at ransom. At the end of the day, you're the bigger person. You're the one making the decisions. They are not the one going out there to hustle and work and bring in the money. They do not know whether, how much money you earn and all that. But while you don't, you talked about your children not holding you ransom. Also, do not deprive them.
Yes.
And let's sit them down and talk to them. Tell them this is what is on ground. If you want this hairstyle and I cannot afford it in the moment, let's do this. Kids actually, they may be angry in the moment or sad in the moment, but later on they do understand. I mean, they're kids.
Well, I understand as children, you need friends, you need siblings, you need people to talk to, people to learn from and stuff like that. But at the end of the day, we've also seen, they're not always the best relationships.
Yes.
And sometimes it can even stem from you as a parent, because you don't know how to share your love. So you end up comparing
favoring a child.
Yes, you end up favoring a child, because you're like, maybe I prefer my firstborn, because, we went through this and this, so here we are, or you prefer the last one because, he or she came at a time where, there was so much love and you had all the resources and stuff like that. So to a great extent, I don't think a child should force you to, have another sibling if you're not ready, if you don't have the resources, and if deep down in your heart, you don't have that love that you're going to equally share amongst those children.
But what about, let's look at the cons of having an only child. Okay. Now, in our African, traditional society, we so much believe in the notion of lineage continuity.
Yes.
What about in the event that you lose your child? Unfortunately, God forbid, God forbid, you lose your child. And what about in the event that your child refuses to have children?
Or
then how do you ensure continuity of your legacy?
Well, at the end of the day, society has progressed in so many ways. I don't think even society should be dictating what happens in your individual life.
No, it's not about dictating your individual life. It's about you as a person continuing your legacy, so that for decades and generations to generations come, they know that, hey, my great grandma.
Lineage and family is a good thing. But here's the thing, you talked about what if you lose your only child. You can lose about 5 of them in one accident.
Absolutely.
that can happen as well. God forbid, yes, God forbid, but you can actually, there's a certain family that were headed for visitation in Imbara from Kampala, and there were three kids in the car. One was at school, so there were only 4, and then their mother and their father, and they all crashed in the accident. There was only that one person who was left, whom they were visiting at school. So it's actually possible that, in one day, God forbid, you can lose your family, and that definitely will not guarantee the longevity or continuity of the lineage. But then again, and also, okay, let me also talk about the issue of, you could have only girls.
Yeah.
Right? And girls at the end of the day get married. They get married to their husbands, and you are producing children, but who belong to your husband. In the African setting, kids belong to the men.
Yes.
So yes, I know of a family that has 5 girls, so they have no no boy
No
in
boy.
there. So which means that actually there's no heir. Eventually when the father passes on, I mean the ladies are on the other end with their families. So it's really not about continuity, because you cannot guarantee which gender of the child that you're going to give birth to. You can also not guarantee. Sometimes there are people who cannot give birth to more than one child, not because they do not want,
Exactly.
but because of underlying health conditions. So in that event, I mean, there are cousins. There is all that. There is cousins, there are uncles, there.
but
It's
there's-
not guaranteed that it should be your child.
But
who
there's
is your
a
heir.
sense, of the child, one, being lonely, and then there's also the sense of parents becoming overprotective. Let me share with you some disadvantages of having one child. Loneliness. A child that is born and raised alone may feel lonely. And actually, this loneliness can later on develop into even more extreme and even worse mental health conditions. Can lead to depression, it could lead to a bipolar disorder, it could lead to anxiety, whatever the case may be. Moving on, pressure. Kids may face a lot of pressure because their parents expect them to perform well in school and other activities. So you are my one child, you must be
My hopes are in you.
Okay, my life.
Oh my hopes are
I'm
in you.
living my life
Yes.
vicariously through you, and you must perform, you must please me, you must, there's a lot of pressure on that one child to be perfect. And then there's overprotectiveness. Parents become very overprotective and overly paranoid about their children. Any small thing. We have seen issues of especially sons who are the only child, and the mom is just like, you get married, you bring your wife here, start your home in my home, start your family in my home. We have seen overprotective parents. Then there's also failure to make friends, and actually this is actually quite common with children that are only the only child in their family.
Yes.
They're very socially awkward, and they don't know how to socialize with other people. They're probably not used to sharing. They're probably not used to, having anybody else around them to, support them, or they're just weird around people.
Yes.
You understand what I
Yes,
mean?
yes.
Moving on, there's sole caregivers. In the event that something happens to the parent, then the child becomes the sole caregiver
entire
of the
burden is on
parent.
them,
Exactly, the
yes.
entire burden is on them. And then self-entertaining, they have to find ways to entertain themselves. And then there's lack of motivation, because, again, believe it or not, our siblings are sometimes the reason as to why we become overly competitive.
Yes.
And want to thrive and be better achievers in life, because you have somebody who your mother is constantly comparing yourself to. You see your sister, she's a lawyer, she got married to a judge.
What
you
are
see
you
your
doing
brother,
for yourself?
he's an engineer, but you, what are you doing? Make it make sense. Well, bringing it down here to Uganda, actually a number of men are choosing to have fewer and fewer children, which is a good thing. Thank you, because our population,
Financial literacy,
which is actually a good thing, because our population is actually skyrocketing by the year. And at the moment, and as of 2021, the Uganda population growth rate is at 47,123,532, and at a growth rate of 3.02% from 2020, where the population was 45 million. We are up 2 million. Imagine that. That's just crazy. And the fertility rate in Uganda as of 2021 is now at 4.665 births per woman. That means a woman in Uganda can have at least up to 4 children. Okay, that is a minimum. Okay, some ladies can have more, but just up to 4%. And that is actually a decline from 2020 at a decline of 2.41% from 2020. And in 2020, the birth rate was at 4.780. That means 4 leaning into 5 children per woman, and a decline of 2.35% from 2019. I know it
numbers are really skyrocketing.
Yes, it is. I know, but the fertility rate is reducing because, of course, there are things attributed to that, like family planning. I am glad that people are now family planning. It's very important. I am for siblings, because I grew up with having siblings, and I know how beautiful a relationship with your
sibling
siblings
can
can be.
Yes.
For instance, all my siblings are my closest friends. They're my best friends. Like and I can be myself with them without any judgment. I mean, you're stuck with me for life, yeah?
I think having siblings for friends is actually a blessing.
Yes.
Because I have encountered families where you find siblings are always at loggerheads, speaking ill of each other, fighting for this in the event that maybe they're from a wealthy family, they are, you know, fighting for property. I'm taking this, I am taking that, and actually they're more inclined on their friendships than their siblings, which means for me, I take it that if your siblings, if you happen to have siblings who are your friends, then that is a blessing, something that you should thank God for. You mentioned about growing up as an only child. It brings about loneliness, and usually kids turn out to be introverts, which is actually true. I mean, you wake up in the morning, if you do not have school, you're watching TV, you're reading a book, and you're seated back at home with a nanny. You have no child to interact with.
Yes.
Well, and that is why I advise it. I have no children, but but I think it's advisable that when you have kids, and let's say a child and that have cousins probably in the village, back there in the village, or even if it's in Kampala or any other place that you're working at, time for holiday, let those kids go to the village. Let them, you know, go in places where there are other kids so that they can interact, and also give you some space, you know, to do things without having to breathe, without having to have kids around. So I think it's a good thing. And also, if let's say the child is little, take them to a daycare center. Well, if you can afford, I mean, there's those that cannot afford, take them to a daycare center where they can interact with other kids. Over the weekend, take them to parks, to museums, to those places where they find children to interact, so that you can, you know, curb down the loneliness bit of it. Yes. And yeah, it's a good thing to grow up, for a child to grow up around people. They get matches. Okay, it also has its downside, because they get to pick up certain characters, certain behaviors, which is not a good thing, but it's a good thing for kids to grow up around children.
Before I continue with some of the other benefits of having a sibling, I wanted to ask the question, in the event that the parent is a single parent, and I'm not talking about just a single mom, could be also a single father. If it's a single parent and the child asks for another child, I mean for a sibling, do you still think it is selfish for the parent to not want to have another child? Because first of all, personally, I feel like, and this is my personal opinion, that it's rather reckless to keep on having children with multiple people if you're not going to be there to completely handle the responsibility that comes with it. Because see, in the event that you have a second child with another partner, right, what happens in the event that one of your kids' fathers or your children's mothers is absent in one of the other siblings' life? Like, aren't you now just going to be causing more harm than good? I don't know. What do you think about that?
I believe
Priva, what do you think about that?
Well, I think, first of all, I need us to talk about schools. Like, we are downplaying the importance of schools in our children's lives.
Yes.
I think the average Ugandan child goes to school at the age of like 3 years.
Yes.
And normally they spend about 9 months out of 12 months at school.
Yes.
I think being around children, fellow, you know, age mates and stuff like that, it's good for them. And parents shouldn't still be under pressure. You know,
no pressure,
no pressure. By the time your child is 3, you're able to take him to, you know, kindergarten or stuff like that, and they'll be able to socialize with kids their same age. They'll be able to learn a lot of stuff. But of course, when they get back home, you as a parent, you still need to honor your responsibility of teaching them the values that you need: kindness, sharing, being empathetic, being compassionate. It all goes back to you as a parent.
Yes.
And asking, sorry, talking about what you asked, if you are a single father or you're a single mom and
the
you
child
meet someone
wants
else,
some
meet someone else, it's not selfish for you to still, you know, say no. And if you have a child with another person and they're not present in your child's life, it's another learning lesson.
But how many learning lessons are you going to have?
I believe in growing up in a solid family setting. Well, that is where I grew up from. And sometimes when you compare it to children who have grown up in broken families, whereby you find a woman has about 4 or 5 baby daddies.
Yes.
It's a broken family, and those children usually are traumatized, and they have a lot of a lot of us, not stress, but mental issues, honestly, because it's like probably they're getting attention from one parent. Maybe on the other end, there is the man or the husband or the father of the child is only sending in child support, and they're not fully present in their life. So for me, it's not selfish in any way to not have a child with any other person, unless you are committed, unless you have a ring on your finger, unless you are married to this man. And that is why I said before, you can sit for as long as the child is at a certain age where they can understand, where you can sit them down and tell them, this is what has happened. I cannot have another child for this and this particular reason. Well, you may not tell them that because yes, but you can. Could you tell them it's because I need to be married. I need you to grow up in a solid family. Yes. And that is the reason I'm not having kids at the moment. But at a later time, when we are, when I have a husband, when we have a family and a family setting, then we'll have more kids. I think kids would understand that, because what is the essence of having more children and yet they're all scattered all over the place? Growing up in a broken family is not really a good thing at all.
I like what you say. I really loved what you said when you said that it's important to have children and you are raising them in a family unit that is beneficial to them and not detrimental to them. So why have more children if their fathers are not present, or if their mothers are not present, or if you're not going to even have time for them? But I still love the idea, at least having 2 children. It makes economic sense, you understand? But anyway, child psychologists were asked how parents or single parents can best address the dilemma when their only child asks for a second sibling or wants another sibling. Well, they do say, and they advise that, number 1, do not dismiss your child's feelings or question. Do not, chase them away. Do not ask them the question that, why are you asking me this question? Matter of fact, what you have to do is acknowledge their feelings and explain to them why you cannot give them another sibling right away. It's also important to ask them why they think they need another sibling. And from there, you'll be able to understand where the question is coming from, okay? Perhaps their cousins have, siblings. Perhaps children at school, their friends have siblings, and it's something that they think that they want, and it's just FOMO, fear of missing out. But nonetheless, do not dismiss your child's feelings, and please have a cordial and a respectful conversation with them and let them understand why they cannot have another sibling right away. But before we leave, I'd like to read some responses from social media, because we asked the question: in the event the only child wants a sibling, is it selfish if the parent doesn't want to have more children? And our first response coming from someone called Mary, and she says, yes, it's selfish. If you have all the means in check, for instance, your medical, your finances, for these are earthly things. And she moves on to say, even if you give him the world or your child the world, when he knows that he's complete with a blood sibling, you are sowing seeds on a rock. And then Olive goes on to say that, no, it is not. Children don't determine what a parent chooses to do with their body. That plus, parents should only bite what they can chew, because raising a child or children is on them, so they can't and shouldn't make emotional decisions. Being an only child isn't being handicapped. And lastly, Francis goes on to say, well, who will feed and educate said siblings? Life is to be eaten. Question. Well, that is all we had for you on this segment of Our Views, but the conversation does continue across all our social media handles on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Please let me know what you think. Is it necessary to have more children in the event your only child wants to have children? And if so, what are your thoughts, and how are you going to deal with this question? Has your child asked you this question? How did you deal with it? Perhaps your response can help any other people who are struggling with this dilemma in the comments section. So this is Sunrise at Sea. Don't blink.
Well, you are still watching Sunrise at Sea here on CTV. It's been a great time having you all the way from 7 a.m. to 9 a.m. Now, before we actually, sign out, I would like to ask you ladies, how beautiful was your Easter?
Family, it was great. It was calm, nice, and peaceful. I was very, relaxed and rested. Yeah, and I mean, for us in our profession, it's like every other day at the job.
It's
So
a
you're
work day.
working while you're relaxing.
Yes.
Yeah.
Did you have a great time, Priva? Or how did your Easter go?
I really did. I like spending time with family. Seeing kids and your cousins and your friend, your sisters and all that. It's
Yes.
always nice spending time with family and just feasting. I feel like that's why we celebrate Easter.
Yeah.
Like to a great extent, like growing up as a child, I knew like
Yeah.
Easter, there's a lot of food, there's a lot of merrymaking, so many people around and
Yes.
stuff like that. And yeah, it was nice. It was a good one.
Okay, well, I did have a great time with my family and friends. And remember, if you are out there at home, it's time to get to work. There's no such thing as Easter Tuesday. You know, some people thought that they could have an extra day. So when you trained in the morning, they're like, okay, I think this is an extra day for me to stay back at home. Remember, the hustle continues. The prices of commodities are up there. So you need to be up on your feet and go out there and hustle. And yes, it's a chilly day. So remember to get yourself a cup of coffee or even carry a cardigan, a jacket, whatever it is that can keep you warm throughout the entire day. Well, thank you so much for joining us on Sunrise at Sea, and thank you for always being part of CTV. Catch you tomorrow, same time, same place. From the ladies and I and the entire team, we wish you a wonderful day.